O negative! We're out of O negative blood! The doctor's voice echoed through the emergency room. A little girl lay motionless on the stretcher, her breathing growing weaker. The elegant mother broke into tears, trembling hands gripping the edge of the bed. "Save my daughter! Please!" she screamed desperately. Nurses frantically shook their heads. "There's no one in the hospital who matches." Suddenly, a man's voice rang out from behind. "I have O negative!" Everyone turned around. It was just a man in a worn work uniform. The girl's mother froze, unable to believe it. He said calmly, "Please take my blood. Don't be late." No one knew the man she had looked down on that afternoon was the one who would save her daughter. Daniel Cole, 36 years old, single dad, worked 3 jobs at once: warehouse worker, night shift driver, and janitor at the shopping mall. His daughter, Lily, 6 years old, a sweet girl who loved drawing hearts and writing little notes for her father. "Daddy, you're my hero." The female lead, Victoria Hale, 32 years old, cold young CEO, famously demanding, dressed elegantly, words sharp as knives. That same afternoon, Daniel delivered packages to the wrong floor and was severely scolded by Victoria. "How do you work? Typical of people with no future." Daniel just bowed his head, apologizing because he didn't want Lily to see her father arguing. Lily held her father's hand, whispered, "Are you okay, Dad?" Daniel smiled. "I'm fine." That night, Victoria took her daughter Emma, 7 years old, to a party, but the child suddenly fainted on the way home. She panicked, rushed Emma to the hospital, trembling while making desperate phone calls. Emma had internal injuries, losing a lot of blood, needed O negative immediately. The doctor announced the blood bank was empty. Victoria's face turned deathly pale. The doctor's voice shouted, "We need O negative! Hurry!" Right then, Daniel, working part-time at the hospital, ran over after hearing the commotion. When he learned the little girl needed O negative, he stepped forward. "I have that blood type." Victoria turned around, shocked. "It's you. It can't be." Daniel said calmly, "Just save the child. Let's begin." Real person's mark, end of Act 1, Lily's handwritten note. "Daddy, you're my hero," fell from Daniel's pocket. Victoria picked it up. The emergency room was chaos incarnate. Doctors barking orders, nurses running with equipment, monitors beeping urgent warnings. Emma lay small and pale on the gurney, her lips already taking on a bluish tint from oxygen deprivation. Victoria stood frozen, her usual composure shattered completely. She was CEO Victoria Hale, the woman who commanded boardrooms, who closed billion-dollar deals with a signature, who never showed weakness. But none of that mattered now. Her daughter was dying, and she was helpless. Completely, terrifyingly helpless. "Ma'am, we need you to sign consent forms." A nurse thrust papers at her. Victoria's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Her signature was unrecognizable, just a scrawl of panic and fear. "How long does she have?" Victoria's voice cracked. "Without blood? Minutes, maybe 10 if we're lucky." 10 minutes. Her daughter's entire life reduced to 10 minutes. Victoria felt the world tilting, her knees threatening to give out. Then she heard it. That voice, the delivery man from this afternoon. The one she'd berated for being 5 minutes late, for using the service elevator wrong, for not being perfect enough for her standards. "I have O negative." 3 words. Simple, direct, life-saving. Daniel didn't wait for permission or gratitude. He was already rolling up his sleeve, already sitting in the donation chair. The nurses rushed over. "Take what you need, all of it, if necessary." "Sir, we can't take all of it." "My daughter is 6 years old," Daniel cut off the doctor. "If something happened to her and someone could save her, I'd want them to give everything. So take what you need." The doctor nodded, understanding the calculus of fatherhood. Victoria watched this man, this stranger she treated like dirt hours ago, casually offer his blood to save her child. No hesitation, no demands, no conditions, just pure, selfless action. The needle went in, dark red blood flowing through the tube, life flowing from one person to another. Why? Victoria whispered, standing beside Daniel's chair. Why would you help me after what I said? Daniel looked at her, eyes tired but kind. Because your daughter isn't responsible for your words. And she deserves to live regardless of how her mother treats strangers. The rebuke was gentle but devastating. Victoria had spent years building walls, being harsh, demanding perfection because anything less felt like weakness. And this man, this janitor working 3 jobs, had just shown her what real strength looked like. It wasn't money or power or control. It was a giving without expecting anything in return. The transfusion began. Emma's monitor stabilized, color slowly returning to her face. Victoria collapsed into a chair, relief and shame warring inside her. She looked down, noticed the paper in her hand, the note that had fallen from Daniel's pocket. Daddy, you're my hero. Written in crayon, with backwards letters and uneven spacing. A child's absolute faith captured in 5 words. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. When was the last time Emma had looked at her like that? With pure love, unmarred by disappointment or fear or resentment. She couldn't remember. She'd been too busy building empires, crushing competitors, proving she didn't need anyone. And in the process, she'd forgotten what actually mattered. The tears fell, silent and bitter. A reckoning years in the making. The waiting room after the blood transfusion. Daniel pale, sitting against the wall, breathing tired but eyes still watching the emergency room door. Victoria sat quietly beside him, hands still holding the paper. Daddy, you're my hero. She asked gently, why did you help after what I said? Daniel replied, because your words don't matter as much as your daughter's life. Victoria bowed her head, feeling ashamed of her behavior for the first time. Lily arrived at the hospital when she learned her father was in trouble. Ran to hug Daniel. Dad, don't scare me. Victoria watched that scene, feeling a painful pang. It had been so long since she'd hugged her own child like that. Sitting together in the small hospital room, they shared about childhood, losses, and lonely days raising children alone. Victoria burst into tears, confessing, I'm afraid of becoming a failed mother, like my mother. Daniel stayed silent, placed a cup of water in front of her. You're not failing. You're fighting for your child. Lily gave Victoria a piece of badly made cake she'd made. Would you like some? I made it for Dad. Victoria took a bite, laughed. Burnt, but delicious. For the first time in years, Victoria felt her heart lighten. Real person's mark, end of Act 2. Lily's burnt cookie was kept in Victoria's coat pocket. The hours passed slowly in that sterile waiting room. Other families came and went, their own dramas playing out. But Victoria and Daniel remained, connected by crisis and blood, and something neither could name yet. Tell me about her, Victoria said finally. Your daughter. Daniel's face softened immediately, the way all parents' faces do when talking about their children. Lily, 6 years old going on 60, too smart for her own good. Loves to bake even though everything comes out burnt. He laughed. We joke that we should open a bakery called Crispy Creations. She sounds wonderful, Victoria said, meaning it. She is. She's everything. Her mother died when she was 2. Cancer. We had 6 months from diagnosis to... He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. I can't imagine. You can't, Daniel agreed. Until it happens. Then you can't imagine anything else. Every moment is colored by that loss. Every milestone she reaches. I think about how Sarah should be here to see it. He rubbed his eyes. I work 3 jobs, not just for money, but to stay busy. If I stop moving, I start thinking. And thinking leads to dark places. Victoria understood that more than he knew. I lost my husband 3 years ago. Car accident, drunk driver. Emma was 4. She still asks when Daddy's coming home sometimes. Her voice cracked. I threw myself into work for the same reason. Staying busy keeps the grief at bay. They sat in companionable silence. 2 wounded people recognizing each other's pain. The emergency room doctor emerged, still in scrubs, mask pulled down. Your daughter is stable. The transfusion worked. She's going to be okay. Victoria stood so fast she nearly fell. Daniel caught her elbow, steadied her. Can I see her? Soon. We're moving her to a room now. She's sedated but stable. The doctor looked at Daniel. You should eat something. You gave a lot of blood. Don't want to lose consciousness. I'm fine, Daniel started to say, but Victoria interrupted. No, you're not. You just saved my daughter's life. The least I can do is make sure you don't collapse. She turned to a nurse. Where's the cafeteria? Down the hall, take 2 lefts. Victoria grabbed Daniel's arm. Come on. The cafeteria was nearly empty at 3 a.m. Just a few residents grabbing coffee between shifts and one janitor mopping floors. Victoria and Daniel sat with terrible coffee and stale sandwiches, and somehow it felt like the best meal Victoria had eaten in years. I was horrible to you, Victoria said. This afternoon, I was stressed and angry and I took it out on you. That was wrong. Apology accepted, Daniel said simply. Just like that? Just like that. Life's too short to hold grudges. I learned that when Sarah died. You can be angry and bitter, or you can choose to let it go. I choose letting go. He took a sip of coffee, grimaced. Though I might hold a grudge against whoever made this coffee. Victoria laughed, actually laughed, and it felt strange. Rusty, like muscle she'd forgotten how to use. When was the last time she'd laughed? Really laughed, not the polite corporate chuckle she deployed at business dinners. She couldn't remember. You're different than I expected, she admitted. People usually are, Daniel said. When you actually talk to them instead of at them. The gentle rebuke landed. Victoria deserved it. She'd spent years treating people as obstacles or tools, never as actual humans with their own lives and struggles. I want to be better, she said quietly. I want Emma to have a mother she's proud of, not one she's afraid of. She's not afraid of you, Daniel said. Kids don't fear their parents unless given reason. She might be confused or hurt when you're distant, but not afraid. There's still time to fix it. How do you know? Because Lily told me tonight. She said your daughter talks about you all the time at school. My mom is the boss of everything. She's proud of you. She just wants you to be around more. The words hit Victoria like a punch. Emma was proud of her. Despite everything, despite the absences and the distance and the cold corporate shell she'd built, her daughter was proud. I don't deserve that, Victoria whispered. Maybe not, Daniel agreed, but you can earn it. Starting now, starting with being there when she wakes up. Lily appeared then, escorted by a nurse. She'd been sleeping in the children's area, but had woken up looking for her father. Daddy! She ran to him, climbed into his lap despite being too big. I was scared. I know, baby, but I'm okay. See? Just a little tired. Lily looked at Victoria with solemn 6-year-old eyes. Is your little girl okay? She is, Victoria said, throat tight. Thanks to your daddy. Daddy's a hero, Lily said matter-of-factly. He saves people. That's what heroes do. She pulled something from her pocket, a crumpled piece of paper with crayon marks. Here, for your girl. When she wakes up. Victoria unfolded it, a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands, one big, one small. Above them, a crayon sun and the words friends forever in Lily's careful letters. Victoria pressed it to her chest, unable to speak. This child, daughter of a man she'd mocked, was offering comfort to a stranger. Offering love where none was required, teaching the lesson Victoria had forgotten. Kindness matters more than success. Victoria's family, especially her brother Lawson, opposed her growing closeness with Daniel. Lawson shouted, being close to that kind of person will disgrace the Hale group. Victoria shouted back, were you at the hospital when Emma was dying? No. Lawson found ways to get Daniel fired from all his jobs. Daniel lost his employment in a single day, came home with heavy shoulders. Victoria learned about it, furiously stormed into the family meeting. Lawson declared, either family or that guy. Victoria stood up, hands shaking. I choose the man who saved my daughter. The family threw her out of the mansion. Media began reporting. Lawson called security to force Daniel out of the hospital when he came to visit Emma. Victoria blocked Daniel, shouted, enough! He saved my daughter! In front of reporters, she exposed the truth that Lawson had embezzled from the foundation. Lawson was detained by police. the family in chaos. Victoria turned to Daniel, eyes red. I'm sorry for looking down on you, and thank you for saving both me and my daughter. Daniel's voice trembled. I just did what any father would do. The confrontation happened at the Hale family estate, a sprawling mansion that had intimidated Victoria since childhood. The same place where her mother had ruled with an iron fist, where emotions were weakness and business was everything. Now Victoria stood in that familiar study, facing her brother across their father's old desk. You're embarrassing us, Lawson said coldly, parading around with some janitor like he's your equal. He's better than my equal, Victoria shot back. He's a decent human being. When's the last time you saved a life, Lawson? When's the last time you did something that didn't serve your own interests? Watch your mouth, Lawson warned. I run this company now. I can make your life very difficult. You mean more difficult than watching my daughter almost die? More difficult than realizing the man I'd been cruel to was the only one who helped. Please tell me how you'll make my life worse. Lawson's expression turned ugly. You want to know? Fine. Your janitor boyfriend? He's fired. From all 3 jobs. I made some calls. By tomorrow he'll be unemployable in this city. Victoria's blood ran cold. You didn't. I did. And I'll do worse if you don't end this nonsense. The Hale name means something. I won't let you drag it through the mud for some romantic fantasy. Victoria stared at her brother, seeing him clearly for the first time. The cruelty, the pettiness, the complete lack of empathy. How had she never noticed? Or had she noticed and simply not cared because it didn't affect her? I'm done, she said quietly. Done with what? Done with this family. Done with putting business before humanity. Done pretending that money and power matter more than basic decency. She stood, walked toward the door. Emma and I are leaving. You walk out that door, you're cut off. No trust fund, no company shares, nothing. Victoria paused, hand on the doorknob. A year ago, that threat would have terrified her. Everything she'd built, everything she'd worked for, gone. But now, after watching Emma almost die, after seeing what real courage looked like in a hospital waiting room, keep it, she said. All of it. I don't want money that comes with strings attached to monsters. She walked out, head high, leaving behind a lifetime of expectations and obligations. Her phone started ringing immediately. Board members, investors, family friends, all demanding explanations. She ignored them all. There was only one call she needed to make. Daniel, it's Victoria. I need to tell you something. She explained about Lawson, about the jobs, about everything. Expected anger, accusations, resentment. Instead, Daniel just sighed. I figured something like that would happen. People like your brother don't like being challenged. I'm so sorry, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. This is my fault. No, it's his fault. Don't take responsibility for someone else's cruelty. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'll figure something out. Always do. Don't worry about me. How can I not worry? You saved Emma's life, and now you're being punished for it. Not punished, tested. Life tests us all the time. This is just another test. His voice softened. How's Emma doing? Better, asking for you, actually. Wants to thank the man who gave her his blood. Tell her she doesn't need to thank me, just needs to live a good life. That's thanks enough. Victoria's heart broke and healed simultaneously. This man, facing unemployment and hardship because of her, was worried about her daughter's well-being. Daniel, I need to do something. I need to make this right. You don't owe me anything, Daniel started, but Victoria interrupted. Yes, I do. And more importantly, I want to. Not because of obligation, but because it's right. And because, she hesitated, because I'm starting to think you're one of the best people I've ever met. The media circus started the next day. Reporters camped outside Victoria's hotel, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in her face. Ms. Hale, is it true you've been cut off from the family fortune? Ms. Hale, are you romantically involved with a janitor? Ms. Hale, what about the embezzlement allegations against your brother? That last question made her stop. What embezzlement allegations? You didn't make them? Someone leaked documents to the press showing Lawson Hale diverted foundation funds to personal accounts. Millions of dollars. Do you have a comment? Victoria's mind raced. She hadn't leaked anything, but she knew who might have access to those documents. Knew who had worked in the Hale Group building for years, cleaning offices, emptying trash cans, potentially seeing things no one thought to hide from the janitor. No comment, she said, pushing through to her car. She called Daniel immediately. Did you? I might have noticed some financial documents in trash cans, Daniel said carefully. Might have thought they looked suspicious, might have taken photos before throwing them away. You know, just in case they were important. Daniel Cole, you sneaky, brilliant man. I protect people I care about, he said simply. And Lily and I care about you and Emma. So yeah, I did what needed doing. Your brother wanted to play dirty? I can play dirty too, just with truth instead of lies. Victoria laughed through tears. I think I might be falling for you. Silence on the other end. Then, good, because I fell for you the moment you picked up Lily's note and didn't throw it away. When you kept that burnt cookie in your pocket like it was treasure, that's when I knew. Victoria regained control of the company and completely revised policies supporting children in single-parent families. She opened the Emma's Hope Fund, invited Daniel as advisor because he understood the real lives of single fathers. Daniel refused at first, but Lily pulled his hand. Dad has to help them, just like you helped me and her. The first working session, Victoria came to Daniel's home, an old but warm apartment. Emma and Lily quickly became friends, trading burnt cookies and dolls. Victoria watched that scene, her heart softening. Meetings between Victoria and Daniel were full of laughter, completely different from the cold meetings before. One day, Victoria cooked dinner for Daniel and his daughter, spaghetti burnt at the edges but full of sincerity. Daniel laughed. Not bad for a CEO. Victoria blushed but smiled. Lily asked directly, will Miss Victoria stay for dinner with me and Dad every day? Victoria choked on her words. If you want me to. Daniel looked at Victoria for the first time, seeing her eyes no longer cold. The transition wasn't smooth. Building trust never is. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, old habits rearing their heads. Victoria caught herself giving orders instead of asking, being CEO instead of being human. But each time, Daniel gently corrected her. This isn't a boardroom, and he'd say. You don't need to control everything, just be present. It was harder than any business deal she'd ever negotiated. Being vulnerable, admitting she didn't have all the answers, accepting help. But slowly, painfully, she learned. The girls made it easier. Emma and Lily formed an instant bond, the way children do. Playdates became regular occurrences. Movie nights with burnt popcorn. Victoria still couldn't cook. Park visits where Daniel pushed both girls on swings while Victoria watched, feeling something she'd long forgotten. Peace. You're good at this, she told Daniel one afternoon. They were watching the girls play, sitting on a park bench, shoulders almost touching. At what? Being a parent, being present, being enough. I'm not always enough, Daniel admitted. There are days I fall apart after Lily goes to sleep. Days I cry in the shower because I miss Sarah so much I can't breathe. Days I feel like I'm failing at everything. He looked at her. But I show up anyway. That's all any of us can do. Show up and trying. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture of intimacy that would have been unthinkable months ago. I want to show up for Emma, for you, for myself. I just don't always know how. You're learning, Daniel said, wrapping an arm around her. That's what matters. The fund they'd created together, Emma's Hope, began making real impact. Single parents received childcare assistance, job training, emergency funds. Every policy Victoria designed, she ran past Daniel first. Would this have helped you? She'd ask. And he'd give honest answers, pointing out flaws her privileged perspective missed. She learned humility through him. Learned that intelligence came in many forms, that formal education wasn't the only measure of worth. Daniel had street smarts, survival skills, emotional intelligence that far exceeded her own. He was her equal in every way that mattered, and his superior in some. One evening, working late on fund proposals, Victoria fell asleep at Daniel's kitchen table. She woke to find a blanket draped over her shoulders and Lily's drawing propped against her laptop. The same stick figures, but now there were four. Two adults, two children, all holding hands. Family written above in careful letters. Victoria traced the figures with her finger, tears falling onto the paper. Family. She'd lost her family of origin through their own cruelty, but maybe, just maybe, she was building a new one. Chosen family, bound not by blood, but by love and respect and shared struggle. The thought was terrifying and wonderful simultaneously. Hey, Daniel's voice was soft. He sat beside her. Didn't mean to wake you. I'm glad you did, Victoria said. Daniel, I need to tell you something. Okay. I'm scared of this, of us, of everything I'm feeling. I spent years building these trolls, being cold, protecting myself, and you're asking me to tear all that down. I'm not asking for anything, Daniel said gently. But if you want to, if you choose to, I'll be here. Me and Lily. We're not going anywhere. Victoria turned to face him fully. I love you. I didn't plan to, didn't want to, but I do. I love how you see the best in people. How you never gave up on me even when I'd given up on myself. How you make burnt food taste like treasure just by smiling while you eat it. Daniel smiled, the real one that made his eyes crinkle. I love you too. Your strength, your determination, the way you're learning to be sorry without being weak. The way you look at our daughters like they're the most important things in the world. They are, Victoria said. You all are. They kissed then, gentle and sweet, tasting of coffee and promise. In the next room, two little girls giggled, probably spying. Neither adult cared. Let them see. Let them understand that love was possible after loss. That families could be rebuilt. That sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. One morning, all four of them ate breakfast together in the gentle sunlight. Victoria watched Lily and Emma laughing and playing, feeling like she was standing in a place she belonged. Daniel asked, yesterday you were surrounded by reporters. You okay? Victoria smiled softly. When I have someone standing beside me like you, I'm okay. On the table was a box of cookies Lily made, burnt at the edges like every time. Victoria bit into a piece, eyes welling up. Tastes like family. Lily gave her a drawing. Dad, Victoria, two little girls. Victoria covered her mouth, tears falling. She looked at Daniel, whispered, if you and your daughter still need me, I want to stay. Daniel squeezed her hand, whispered back, welcome home. Emma and Lily hugged them both, laughter filling the small apartment. In the early light, Victoria knew she had found what money could never buy, and a new family began from that moment. The apartment was nothing like the mansion Victoria had grown up in. Small, cramped, with mismatched furniture and walls that needed painting. But it held more love than the estate ever had. More laughter, more life, more truth. She'd traded marble floors for worn carpet, and somehow gained everything. I want to adopt Lily, Victoria said one day, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. Daniel froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. What? I mean, if you'd let me, if she'd want that. I know I'm not her mother, I could never replace Sarah. But I love her like she's mine. And I want it to be official. Want her to know she's not just Emma's friend. She's Emma's sister. She's my daughter too. Daniel set down his cup, eyes suspiciously bright. You're serious? Completely. I know it's fast and maybe crazy, but when you know, right? Isn't that what you said about donating blood? You just knew it was right. Yeah, Daniel breathed. Yeah, that's what I said. They told the girls together that evening. Lily's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Really? You'd be my mom too? Like, for real, real? For real, real, Victoria confirmed, kneeling to eye level. If you want me to be. Yes! Lily launched herself into Victoria's arms. I always wanted a mom and a sister. This is the best day ever. Emma was quieter, more thoughtful. At 7, she remembered her father more clearly than Lily remembered her mother. Will you marry Dad? She asked Victoria. Because moms and dads are supposed to be married. Eventually, Victoria said, when we're ready. But marriage or not, we're already family. That doesn't require a certificate. But I want you to marry him, Emma insisted, because then it's official. Then no one can say you're not supposed to be together. The wisdom of children, cutting through complexity to simple truth. You're right, Victoria said. She turned to Daniel. We should make it official. Is this a proposal? Daniel asked, amused. Maybe, yes, Victoria laughed at herself. Daniel Cole, will you marry me? Make this chaos permanent? Let me burn dinner for you for the rest of our lives? The rest of our lives is a long time, Daniel said, pretending to consider. That's a lot of burnt dinners. Daddy, say yes, Lily demanded. Yeah, Dad, say yes, Emma chimed in. Daniel pulled Victoria close, kissed her thoroughly while their daughters cheered. Yes, obviously yes. Been planning to ask you anyway, you just beat me to it. The wedding happened 3 months later. Small ceremony, just close friends and the colleagues from Emma's Hope. Lily and Emma served as flower girls, dropping petals everywhere except the aisle. Victoria wore a simple dress, not the designer gown her mother would have demanded. Daniel wore his one good suit, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, but this time it represented new beginnings instead of endings. When the officiant asked if they took each other, both said I do with voices strong and sure. They'd both been through hell, separately and together. They knew what they were committing to, not some fantasy romance, but real partnership, supporting each other through struggles, celebrating victories, showing up day after day even when it was hard. The kiss was sweet, witnessed by their daughters who clapped and cheered. And when they turned to face their small gathering of guests, Victoria felt complete for the first time in her life. Not because she'd found a man, but because she'd found herself. The version of herself that could love without fear, give without hesitation, be vulnerable without breaking. That night in the apartment that was now officially home to all 4 of them, Victoria tucked both girls into bed. Tell us the story again, Lily requested, about how Dad saved Emma. Yeah, tell it, Emma agreed, so Victoria told them. About the emergency room, about the fear, about Daniel stepping forward when no one else could, about how sometimes heroes don't wear capes, they wear janitor uniforms, about how the person you least expect might be the one who saves you, about how family isn't always blood, sometimes it's choice. The girls fell asleep to the story, hands linked between their twin beds. Victoria stood in the doorway, Daniel's arm around her waist. You did good, he whispered. We did good, she corrected. Together, always together from now on. They closed the door softly, leaving their daughters to dream. And in the small apartment filled with burnt cookies and crayon drawings and second chances, a family rested. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and whole and enough. More than enough. If you believe healing stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.